My name is Morgan Anderson, and I'm 34 years old. I was standing at my sister's 300 guest wedding with a secret sewn under the neckline of my dress, and my whole family thought I was the daughter who couldn't get anyone to love her. They had a story about me. My mom told it. My sister nodded along, and I had spent years being too tired to correct it. So I stood by the gift table where they'd parked me, smiled at people who called me the single one, and touched the thin chain at my collarbone. 8 months. Not one of them knew. And what my mother did with a champagne glass that night, I never saw coming. And what I did back was quieter, and it cost more. Welcome back to Wise Family Revenge, where the calmest person in the room is usually the one holding the truth nobody wants said out loud. If a family ever made you feel invisible while smiling at you, you already understand where this story is going. Stay with me, because the part everyone remembers isn't the toast. Drop a comment and be sure to subscribe. I want you here for what came after the room went silent, and for the choice I made in a hallway when no one was filming. Because getting even was never the point, getting free was. And freedom, it turns out, has a receipt. Daniel and I drove 2 hours to get there, which tells you everything about how close I was to my family. He kept one hand on the wheel and one on my knee, and he didn't say much, because he knew I was rehearsing. The venue was a country club with a long white drive and valets in vests. There were 300 chairs inside, all dressed in ivory, and enough white roses to bankrupt a small town. My sister Ashley had wanted this her whole life. A stage, a crowd. Proof, in floral form, that she was the one worth celebrating. I found my name card at a table near the kitchen doors, the one that got the clatter of dishes and the swing of the server's hips. My mom had done the seating. Of course she had. Daniel looked at the card, then at me, and raised an eyebrow, and I shook my head, because I'd promised myself I wasn't going to make anything of it. I told myself tonight could be different. I told myself maybe, in a room this happy, my mother might finally look at me and see her daughter instead of her disappointment. I smoothed my dress. I checked the chain at my throat one more time. Somewhere across the room, a string quartet started tuning, and the sound went right through my teeth like a warning I chose to ignore. "You okay?" Daniel asked. "I'm fine," I said, which is what I say when I'm not, and he knew that too. He squeezed my hand once. I watched my mother float across the room in dove gray, greeting everyone but us, and I felt the old hope stand up in my chest anyway. It couldn't survive the night. Neither could the story they'd told. I hadn't been in the building 10 minutes before my mother handed me a job. She appeared at my elbow, warm as a spotlight, and said, "Morgan, sweetheart, can you go wait for your Aunt Patrice at the entrance? She gets confused with these big places." Not hello. Not, "You look lovely." A task. I said of course because that's the muscle you build when you're raised to be useful instead of loved. Daniel offered to come with me, and my mother looked at him the way you'd look at a stain you were pretending not to see. "We've got it," she said, meaning I had it, meaning he wasn't part of the we. I felt him go still beside me. He's a patient man, my husband. He runs a two-person surveying business and measures things for a living, and he has never once raised his voice at me in 3 years. But I watched him clock the temperature of that room, the cold current under all that warmth, and I saw him decide to file it away instead of fight it. So I went and stood at the entrance in my nice shoes, and waited for an aunt who didn't recognize me for a full 3 seconds when she arrived. "Are you one of the planners?" Aunt Patrice asked. "No," I said. "I'm Morgan." "Oh," she said. "Carol's girl. The one who—" And then she stopped, and smiled the smile people give you when they've heard a story and decided it's true. I didn't ask which story. I already had a bad feeling I knew. I walked her in, sat her down, and went back to my table by the kitchen. The chain under my dress felt heavier than a chain should. Here's how it always worked in our house. Ashley was the one whose life got celebrated, and I was the one who made the celebrating possible. When she made honor roll, we went out to dinner. When I made honor roll, I was asked to babysit so my parents could take her. Her recitals were events. My graduations were things that happened on the way to something of hers. I don't say this to sound sorry for myself. I say it because it took me 30 years to understand it wasn't an accident. It was a system, and everyone had a part. My mother's part was to keep the family looking perfect from the outside. Ashley's part was to shine. My father's part was to keep the peace by never noticing anything. And my part, the part I got handed before I could refuse it, was to be fine, to need nothing, to hold the coats and take the pictures and never, ever be the problem. I got so good at being fine that I disappeared, a little at a time, until being invisible felt safer than being seen. Because when they did see me, it usually meant I'd done something wrong. So I learned to move through my own family like a nurse on a night shift, quiet, competent, there when needed, gone when not. I even chose a job like that. I work the intensive care unit at a regional hospital, and I'm good at it because I've spent my whole life reading a room and giving people what they need before they ask. What I never learned was how to ask for anything back. That's the thing about being fine. Nobody checks on the person who's fine, and nobody, not once, checks the chair by the kitchen doors. The secret at my throat was a wedding ring. Mine. Daniel and I had gotten married 8 months earlier on a gray Tuesday in November at the county courthouse 2 hours from here. It wasn't a sad little thing. It was a good day. The best of my life. We had 11 people, folding chairs, a cake from a grocery store that Daniel swore was the finest cake ever baked. His mother cried. My best friend read a poem. We were happy in a way that didn't need 300 chairs to be real. And I had wanted my family there. That's the part that still catches in my chest. I mailed them invitations, real ones, with a stamp I licked myself, addressed to my parents and to Ashley, 6 weeks out. I pictured my mother opening hers. I let myself imagine her being proud. Instead, nothing came back. No card, no call, no yes, no no. Just a silence I filled in with the worst story I had, which was that they'd read the invitation and decided I wasn't worth the drive. So I stopped asking. I wore the ring on a chain under my clothes at family things, because showing it felt like handing them one more thing to be cold about. 8 months. Not one of them said a word. And I'd convinced myself that was my fault. That I'd done the inviting wrong somehow. That a better daughter would have gotten a yes. I stood by the kitchen doors at my sister's wedding and I believed, right up until an hour later, that my family had simply chosen not to come to mine. I was wrong about who chose what. I just didn't know it yet. You'd think, after all that, I'd have shown up armored. I didn't. I showed up hoping. That's the humiliating truth I have to tell you if the rest of this is going to make sense. Some stubborn kid part of me still wanted my mother to cross that room, take my face in her hands and say, "There you are." I wanted it so badly that I'd made a whole set of rules for the night to protect the hope. Rule 1, don't bring up the ring. Rule 2, don't bring up the invitation. Rule 3, whatever Ashley does, whatever Mom says, do not make this day about you. Give them the perfect wedding, and maybe, just maybe, they'll give you a place at the table. I actually believed that trade was available. I had spent 30 years paying into it. Daniel found me at the kitchen door table and crouched down so we were eye level, the way he does. "You don't have to earn a seat here," he said quietly. "You already have a family. It's the two of us. And it's good." I told him I knew. I didn't. Not in the place where it counts. Because the want that had run my whole life wasn't a want for a husband or a home. I had those. It was a want to be chosen by the people who made me, on their terms, in their light, just once. And a want like that will keep you standing by a kitchen door for decades, smiling, waiting for a door that was never going to open. I sipped my water. I watched my mother laugh with strangers. And I told myself, be good, be quiet, be fine. It's the last time I ever gave myself that instruction. The first needle came with the salad course. Aunt Patrice had been reseated near me. The kitchen table is where they put the ones who don't fit the picture. And she patted my arm with the terrible kindness of a woman about to twist a knife she doesn't know she's holding. "Still single, dear?" she asked. "It'll happen. Look at your sister. Good things come to girls who wait." And before I could find something gentle to say, my mother, passing behind us with a glass in her hand, laughed her party laugh and said, "Oh, Morgan's married to that hospital. Aren't you, sweetheart? Always working." A few people at the table chuckled. It was such a small thing. That's how they always were. Never a blow you could point to, just 1,000 little cuts delivered with a smile, so that if you flinched, you were the dramatic one. I felt my face do the thing it's done my whole life, the pleasant mask sliding into place, the swallow, the nod. Married to the hospital. She had no idea how funny that was, or how cruel, or how close to a truth she'd stepped on without looking. I looked down at my salad and I felt the ring press against my sternum with every breath. I could have said it right then. I could have set down my fork and told the whole table. But Rule 3 was still holding, and the hope was still standing, and I still thought there was a version of the night where I got the mother instead of the performance. So I said, "Always working, Mom. Somebody has to." And she was already gone, floating to the next cluster of admirers, and I realized several of them were looking at me like they knew something I didn't. I found out what they knew by accident, the way you find most terrible things. I'd gone to refill Aunt Patrice's water and paused behind a pillar near the bar, and two of my cousins were talking with their backs to me, loud the way people get after the second glass. "I feel bad for Carol, honestly," one of them said. "You raised two girls the same, and one of them just cuts you off. Didn't even invite her own parents to her wedding if she even had one. Who does that?" The other one made a sympathetic noise. "Ashley said Morgan told her she was done with the family. Just done. Over nothing." And they moved off toward the dance floor, and I stood behind that pillar with a water glass in each hand and felt the floor tilt. Didn't even invite her own parents. That was the story. That was the story the whole room had been handed about me. That I was the ungrateful daughter who'd secretly married and slammed the door on the family who loved her. I had spent 8 months believing they'd rejected my invitation. And here, at the bar, was proof they believed I'd never sent one. Both couldn't be true. Somebody had built a wall between me and my family and painted my face on the wrong side of it. I set the water glasses down very carefully because my hands had started to shake, and not from hurt anymore. From something colder and clearer. For the first time all night, I wasn't wondering what I'd done wrong. I was wondering who had done this. And I already had a name rising in me, a name I'd spent a lifetime protecting. And I didn't want it to be true. It was. I went looking for my mother, because part of me still thought this was a misunderstanding I could fix with one honest conversation. I found her in the little bridal antechamber off the main hall, fixing Ashley's veil in a gilt mirror, the two of them lit gold and laughing. For a second I just watched them. They looked like a magazine. They looked like the family I'd been trying to earn my way into my whole life. "Mom," I said, "can I talk to you for a minute? Alone. It's important." She met my eyes in the mirror and her smile didn't move, but something behind it did. "Not now, Morgan," she said. "It's your sister's day. Whatever it is, it can wait." "It really can't," I said, and I heard my own voice stay soft, apologetic, small, even now. Ashley didn't turn around. She watched me in the mirror with an expression I couldn't read, and she said lightly, "Morgan, please don't, not today." "Don't what?" I hadn't done anything yet. But they both looked at me like I was already the disturbance, the smudge on the perfect glass, the problem that needed managing. And my mother turned back to the veil and said, "We'll talk another time, sweetheart. Go enjoy the party." Go enjoy the party. As if there were a party in this building that had ever been for me. I stood in the doorway a second longer than was comfortable, and then I did what I'd always done. I left them to their gold light and their mirror, but something in me had finished. The hope that tonight could be different, the thing I'd carried in the car for 2 hours, didn't die dramatically. It just quietly closed its eyes. And in the space where it had been, I started to think. I found Daniel out on the stone terrace, because I needed air, and I needed the one person in the building who saw me. The sun was going down over the golf course, turning everything the color of a bruise healing. He handed me his water without asking. "You've got your ICU face on," he said. "The one where something's coding and you're the only calm one." I almost laughed. "They think I cut them off," I said. "The whole room. They think I got married in secret and told everyone I was done with the family. That's the story Ashley's been telling." He was quiet for a moment, doing the math I'd already done. "But you invited them," he said. "I mailed the invitations myself. I remember the stamps." "I know you did," he said. "So where did they go?" That was the question, wasn't it? Where does an invitation go when it never arrives and never gets refused, when both sides are left with a silence they each fill with the worst thing? Daniel turned me by the shoulders gently, so I was facing him instead of the window and the gold room beyond it. "You don't owe them a performance," he said. "Whatever this is, we can walk out the front door right now and drive home, and never explain ourselves to a single person in there." I looked past him at my family through the glass, laughing, glowing, telling their story. "I can't," I said. "Not yet. I have to know what happened." "Okay," he said. "Then we find out. But Morgan, stop waiting for a door that won't open. If you have to go back in there, go back in as someone who already has a home, not someone begging for one." I nodded. I wasn't ready to mean it, but I heard it. My cousin Emma was the only one in that family who'd ever treated me like a whole person, so I found her near the dessert table and pulled her aside. Emma is 26, blunt, and allergic to gossip, which made her the one reliable witness in a building full of storytellers. "Emma," I said, "I need you to tell me something straight. What do people think I did?" She winced, which told me it was bad. "Morgan, come on, it's a party." "Emma," she sighed. "Okay. People think you didn't invite anyone to your wedding, that you eloped to make a point and then went no contact. Aunt Carol's been—" She doesn't say it mean, exactly. She says it's sad. Like you broke her heart. My hands were steady now. Cold water steady. "I mailed invitations," I said. 8 months ago. To my parents. To Ashley. I put stamps on them, Emma. I waited for an answer and I never got one. And I thought that was my answer." Emma's face changed slowly, the way a face changes when two stories it's been holding suddenly refuse to fit in the same room. "You invited them," she repeated. "You're sure?" "I'm a nurse," I said. "I don't misremember things I did with my hands." She looked over her shoulder toward the head table, toward my sister glowing in white, and something moved behind her eyes that looked a lot like the thing that had moved behind mine an hour ago. "Morgan," she said quietly, "who told everyone you didn't invite them?" And we both knew the answer before she finished the question, because in our family there was only ever one person all the information about me ran through, one gatekeeper who decided what the family knew and when. I said the name out loud for the first time. Ashley. Once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. Every piece of news about my life had traveled to my family through Ashley for years, because she'd made herself the hub of everything: the family group chat, the holiday planner, the one who kept everyone connected. It looked like generosity. It was control. If my mother wanted to know how I was, she asked Ashley, not me. If I told Ashley something, my parents heard Ashley's version of it, not mine. I had handed her the microphone to my own life without ever noticing, because being the invisible daughter meant I didn't think anyone was listening anyway. Let me tell you what I want you to do right now, before I go find my sister. If you've ever had one person in your family who manages all the information, who decides what everyone knows about you, I want you to drop a single word in the comments. Gatekeeper. I need to know I'm not the only one who lived like this. And subscribe. Because what I found when I confronted her is the reason I'm telling you this at all. Because here's what I finally understood standing by that dessert table. The invitations hadn't vanished into the postal void. They'd landed exactly where I sent them. In a house where the person with the loudest voice had every reason to make sure they were never seen. Ashley didn't want me married and happy and present. A married, happy, present Morgan was competition for the one thing she'd been given at birth and had guarded ever since: the role of the daughter whose life the family celebrated. I wasn't a sister to her. I was a threat to her casting. And she'd handled the threat the way she handled everything: quietly and first. I caught Ashley alone by the coat check, reapplying her lipstick in a compact, radiant, and untouchable in her $1,000 dress. "I need to ask you something," I said. "8 months ago, I mailed invitations to my wedding, to Mom and Dad, to you. Did they arrive?" Her hand didn't stop. She finished her lip, pressed them together, snapped the compact shut. "Morgan, it's my wedding day. Can we not?" "Did they arrive, Ashley?" She sighed like I was a child asking why the sky was a color. "I don't know what you're talking about. Nobody got any invitation. If you'd actually wanted us there, you'd have called, not mailed some card that—" And she stopped. But it was too late, because she'd told me the exact thing she couldn't have known unless she'd held it in her hands. Some card. I'd never described what I sent. I'd said invitations. She was the one who knew it was a card. "That kind," she said, recovering, waving a hand. "You know what I mean." "I do now," I said. Something in my chest that had been clenched for 8 months, for 30 years, went very quiet and very clear. I didn't yell. I've watched families fall apart in ICU waiting rooms, and I've learned that the loudest person is almost never the one holding the truth. So I just looked at my sister, at the small tightening around her eyes, and I let her see that I finally understood. "You took them," I said. It wasn't a question. Her jaw set. "I did this family a favor," she said, so low only I could hear it. "You were always going to embarrass us. I just got ahead of it." Then she walked away toward her 300 guests, and I let her go. I had somewhere to be too. I went into the ladies' room, the fancy one with the fainting couch and the good lighting, and I locked myself in the lounge and looked at the woman in the mirror. She was 34. She had held her family together with 2 hands for as long as she could remember, and it had cost her everything and bought her nothing. And around her neck, under her dress, on a thin chain, was the one thing in this building that was actually hers. I reached back and undid the clasp. The ring slid off the chain into my palm, warm from being against my skin all night, all these months. It's not a big ring. Daniel and I didn't have the money for big, and neither of us cared. It's a plain gold band with a small stone, and it means I chose someone and someone chose me, out loud, in daylight, with our names said in front of witnesses. For 8 months I'd hidden it, because I'd let my family teach me that my happiness was something to apologize for. I stopped. Right there, in the good light, I slid the ring onto my finger where it was always supposed to be. It fit like it had been waiting. I didn't do it to make a scene. I want to be clear about that, because what happened later got told 100 ways. I didn't put it on to throw it in anyone's face. I put it on because I was done taking it off. I looked at my own left hand and I said, quietly, to no one. I stopped waiting to be chosen. And then I washed my hands like it was the start of a shift, dried them, and walked back out into the gold and the noise, wearing my whole life on the outside for the first time. Nobody noticed yet. They would. Walking back to my table, I finally understood the thing that hurt worse than the missing invitations. It would be easier, in a way, if my family had just been careless. If they'd gotten the cards and forgotten, or lost them, or meant to call and let it slide. Carelessness you can forgive. Carelessness isn't personal. But that's not what happened, and I made myself look at what did. Ashley took the invitations. That was one person's cruelty, and cruelty at least has the decency to be someone's fault. The part that gutted me was everyone else. When Ashley told them I'd cut off the family, nobody questioned it. Not my mother, not my father, not one aunt or cousin. They heard, "Morgan secretly got married and abandoned us," and every single one of them thought, "Yes, that sounds like her. That tracks." Because in the story they'd been telling about me my whole life, I was always halfway out the door already. The daughter who needed nothing. The one who was fine. So when someone said I'd left, it fit the picture so neatly that no one bothered to check. That's the wound. Not that Ashley lied, that the lie was believable because of who they'd all decided I was. I sat back down at the kitchen table and I understood that I'd never had a chance. You cannot earn your way back into a family that has already written you as the one who leaves. I'd spent 30 years auditioning for a part they'd already recast before I was old enough to read the script. And the strangest thing happened when I understood that. The grief was enormous. But under the grief, for the first time, was something that felt almost like relief. If I was never going to be chosen, then I could finally stop performing to be. I had one card left to play before the night forced my hand, and it was my father. Ray Anderson is a gentleman. He fixes things in the garage and hums old country songs and has never in my life said a cruel word to me, and I had spent 30 years mistaking that for being on my side. I found him by the bar, nursing a club soda, watching the dance floor with the mild contentment of a man who has successfully avoided every difficult conversation of his life. "Dad?" I said. "Did you know I got married?" He looked at me, and something passed over his face, quick as a cloud, and I watched him decide to keep it light. "Your mother mentioned something," he said. "Sweetheart, tonight's your sister's night. Let's not get into all that." All that. 8 months of my marriage, my whole hidden life, folded up and put away as all that, on a night that could apparently only hold one daughter at a time. "You knew," I said slowly. "You've known for months that I was married and you never called me." He turned his glass in his hand. "I didn't want to take sides," he said. And there it was, the sentence that had defined my childhood. The philosophy of a man who thought neutrality was the same as kindness. But neutrality isn't neutral. When one child is being erased and you decide not to take sides, you have taken a side. You've sided with the erasing. I looked at my father, this good, gentle, cowardly man, and I felt the last support beam I'd been leaning on for my whole life quietly give way. I was alone in that building. Not lonely. Alone. And there's a difference. And knowing it is the beginning of getting free. Daniel was waiting for me by the terrace doors, and he took one look at my face and knew I'd struck out with my father too. He didn't say "I told you so." He's never once said that to me. He just handed me his water again and stood with me while I watched the party I wasn't really part of. "I keep thinking there's a right way to do this," I said. "A way where I say the true thing, and they finally see it and everything gets fixed. Like if I just find the correct sentence, 30 years unlock." "There isn't one," Daniel said gently. "You know there isn't." "I know." "So you've got two choices, the way I see it," he said. "You can leave right now, quiet, and let them keep their story. We drive home, we make eggs at midnight, and you never explain yourself to people who already decided not to believe you. That's a real option, and it's not weak." I waited. Or you stop hiding," he said. "Not to punish anyone, just because you're done carrying it. You let them see the truth once, out loud, and then, whatever they do with it is theirs, not yours." He looked at my left hand and saw the ring, and his whole face changed, softened, and he covered my hand with his. "You put it on," he said. "I put it on," I said. "Good," he said, and his voice was rough. "I didn't decide anything yet. That's the honest part. I didn't walk back in there with a plan. But I walked back in wearing my ring on the outside, standing up a little straighter, with a husband who saw me at my back, and some part of me had already chosen. I just didn't know what the room was about to ask of me. The wedding planner started herding people toward their seats for the toasts, and I felt it before I understood it. That old animal instinct you get in a family like mine, the one that tells you when you're about to be used. My mother had the microphone next on the list, after the maid of honor. And I knew my mother. I knew the way she worked a room, the way she folded little cruelties into warm speeches so that anyone objecting looked like they'd invented the offense. She wasn't going to get up there and only toast Ashley. She was going to use me. She was going to turn the daughter without a visible husband into a little morality tale about patience and good fortune, a gentle public nudge, the kind she'd been delivering all night in salad course doses. It's what our family did at events. Someone had to be the cautionary example so someone else could be the success. And I'd been cast in that role so many times I could feel the shape of it coming. Daniel felt me tense. "What is it?" he asked. "She's going to say something," I said. "About me. In the toast. I can feel it." "Then let's go," he said, already reaching for my coat check ticket. "Right now, before she's up. We don't have to be in the room for it." And God, I wanted to. Every survival instinct I owned said leave, disappear, take the exit like you always have. But I looked at the microphone stand and I looked at my ring, and for once the instinct to vanish met something harder underneath it. "No," I heard myself say. "I'm not going to hide in the parking lot while she tells 300 people a lie about my life. I've done that long enough." Daniel put the ticket back in his pocket. "Okay," he said. "Then I'm right here." They dimmed the lights for the toasts, the way you do, so the head table glowed and the rest of us sat in soft shadow. The maid of honor went first, a college friend of Ashley's, funny and sweet and mercifully short. People laughed, dabbed their eyes, raised their glasses. Then the planner leaned to the microphone and said, "And now, a few words from the mother of the bride." My mother rose. She was luminous in dove gray, a woman who had spent her whole life learning exactly how to be looked at, and the room turned to her like plants to a window. I sat at my table by the kitchen doors with a glass of champagne I hadn't touched, and I felt my heart go into the slow, hard rhythm it gets on the worst nights of my shift, when someone's crashing and everyone's looking at me to be calm. Under the table, Daniel found my hand. On my other hand, the ring caught the low light and threw it back, a small gold spark in all that shadow. My mother tapped her glass with a spoon, and the room hushed, and she smiled out at all of us with the warmth that had raised me and never once reached me. "Thank you all for being here," she began, "to celebrate my beautiful girls." My beautiful girls, plural, as if. She talked about Ashley for a while, about what a light she was, about the day she was born. And then, exactly as I'd known she would, she turned her head slowly across the dim room until she found me at my table in the dark, lifted her glass in my direction, and let her smile turn playful and sharp all at once. Here it came. I set down my own glass. I made myself breathe. And I waited. "And of course," my mother said into the microphone, her voice carrying to every corner of that ivory room, "I have to say something about my other daughter, Morgan." 300 faces turned toward the kitchen table, toward the dark, toward me. I felt them land like a temperature change. "Morgan works so hard," my mother went on, "warm as sunlight, deadly as frost. So dedicated to that hospital of hers, always taking care of everyone else." A few knowing chuckles rippled through the room from people who'd been told the story, who thought they were in on a gentle family joke. "And I just have to ask, sweetheart, because a mother wonders." She paused for effect. She was so good at this. "When are we going to celebrate you? When do we get to throw you a night like this? So, tell us." She raised her glass higher and her smile widened, and she delivered the line she'd clearly been saving, the one designed to land as loving and cut as deep as a scalpel. "When are we finally celebrating your wedding, Morgan?" And the room laughed, softly, indulgently, the laugh of people watching a mother tease a spinster daughter, and my mother stood there glowing in the applause of her own cruelty, absolutely certain she had me, certain I would blush and deflect and mumble something about being too busy, and give her the little public victory she'd come to collect. Because that was the script. For 30 years, that was always the script. I sit in the dark and absorb it, and everyone gets to feel sorry for poor patient Morgan, married to her job. I looked at my mother, lit up and waiting. I looked at Daniel, steady beside me. I looked down at the ring on my hand, catching the light, and I understood that she had just, in front of 300 witnesses, asked me a question I could finally answer with the truth. I stood up. I didn't scrape my chair or knock over a glass. I just rose, quietly, in my off-the-rack dress at the kitchen door table, and the laughter in the room thinned as people realized I was actually going to respond. My mother's smile flickered just slightly, because a response wasn't in her script. I didn't reach for a microphone. I didn't need one. 30 years of ICU nights teaches you how to make a quiet voice carry across a frightened room. "About 8 months ago, Mom," I said. The room went still. "We celebrated it about 8 months ago." My mother laughed once, uncertain. "Morgan, don't be—" "I got married in November," I said. And I lifted my left hand so the low light caught the plain gold band, and 300 people leaned forward at once. "His name is Daniel. He's right here. We had a small wedding at the courthouse. 11 people, a grocery store cake. It was the best day of my life." I let that sit for one breath. My mother's glass was frozen halfway down. And then I said the sentence that ended the night as she'd planned it and started the one that actually happened. "You would have known," I said gently without a shred of heat, looking right at her, "if my invitation hadn't ended up in the trash." You could have heard a fork drop. Somebody's chair creaked. My mother's face did something complicated and awful, the smile trying to hold while the ground moved under it. And across the room, at the head table in all her white, my sister Ashley had gone the specific gray of a person watching a door they'd locked swing slowly open. I sat back down. I picked up my untouched champagne. My hand didn't shake. I'd said the true thing. Out loud. Once. And I hadn't raised my voice to do it. And now, for the first time in my life, the room was quiet enough to hear me. For a second, nobody moved. Then the room did what rooms do when a hidden thing gets said out loud. It started to whisper. 300 people leaning to their neighbors all at once, a sound like wind moving through wheat. My mother stood at the microphone with her toast dying in her throat, and I watched her try to find her footing. "Well," she said, with a brittle little laugh, "isn't that— what a surprise. We'll have to— congratulations, of course." She was reaching for the reframe, the way she always did, trying to fold the whole thing back into a warm family moment, a lovely surprise, nothing to see here. But it was too late, because the guests weren't looking at her anymore. They were looking at the head table. They were looking at Ashley. I watched it happen in real time, this slow turning of 300 heads, this dawning, because they'd all been told the same story. Morgan cut off the family. Morgan didn't invite anyone. And they'd just heard, from the quiet daughter's own mouth, that an invitation existed and ended up in the trash. And you don't have to be a detective to do that math. An invitation that arrived. A family that never knew. One person who managed all the family's information. The whispering changed pitch. Aunt Patrice beside me put her hand over her mouth. Emma, across the room, was already looking at Ashley with an expression I recognized, because it was the same one that had come over my own face an hour before behind the pillar. And Ashley, my radiant sister in her $1,000 dress, sat at the center of her own perfect wedding and felt the story turn against her for the first time in her life. She wasn't used to it. It showed. Ashley did the worst possible thing, which was talk. She stood up at the head table, still holding her bouquet, and said, too loud, too fast, "She's making it up. There was no invitation. Morgan, why would you do this at my wedding?" And a few people nodded because she was the bride and she was beautiful, and beautiful brides get the benefit of the doubt. But panic makes people clumsy, and my sister had never had to lie under pressure before because nobody had ever pushed back on her in her life. "I don't even know what she's talking about," Ashley went on. "Some card that showed up months ago. That doesn't mean—" And she stopped. Again. The second time that night she'd walked herself into the exact wall. Some card that showed up months ago. A card she supposedly never saw, arriving months ago, described by the one person who claimed it never existed. The room heard it. I watched them hear it. A man near the front actually said softly, "So it did show up." And the whisper became a murmur, became something with an edge. Ashley's face crumpled and hardened at the same time, and she looked at me across all those tables with pure fury, because I hadn't done anything except stand still and let her run into her own lie twice. That's the thing about the truth. You don't have to chase it or shout it or dress it up. You just have to stop covering for the people who need it hidden, and then you step back and let it stand there on its own. I hadn't raised my voice once. I didn't need to. My sister was doing all the shouting for both of us, and every word she said made it worse, and she couldn't stop, because stopping meant admitting the silence had an answer. Here's what I want to tell you, because it's the part that surprised me most. I didn't feel triumphant. I know how this looks from the outside, like a revenge story. Like the quiet one finally got her moment and dropped the truth like a bomb and watched them all scramble. And maybe part of it was that. But sitting there in the dim room while 300 strangers turned against my sister, what I mostly felt was grief. Huge and gray and quiet, rising in me like water. Because this was my family. That woman with the dying toast in her hand had rocked me when I had fevers. That bride coming apart at the head table had shared a bedroom wall with me for 18 years. And I had just watched, in the space of 2 minutes, the last thread between us burn through. There was no going back from this. Whatever we'd been, we would never be again. If you've ever been the person who finally said the true thing at the family table and felt the whole room go silent, then you know this exact feeling, the one nobody warns you about. It isn't victory. It's a kind of funeral. Stay with me, because the hardest part of this whole night wasn't the toast. It was still coming, out in a hallway, away from all these witnesses, and it was going to ask me for something the reveal never did. I set down my glass. Daniel's hand was warm over mine, and across the wrecked, whispering room, I saw my mother set down the microphone, square her shoulders, and start walking toward my table with the fixed, purposeful smile of a woman who has decided exactly how she's going to save this. She reached me, she leaned down, and she said, low and sweet, "Morgan, come with me, now." I followed my mother out of the ballroom and into the long carpeted hallway that led to the coat check and the big glass front doors, because some habits are older than any decision, and following her when she said now was one of them. But I noticed, even as I walked, that I was choosing to. That's new, when you've spent your life being pulled. Behind us, the ballroom murmured and glowed. Ahead, through the glass doors, the valet stand sat in a pool of blue evening light, and beyond it, the parking lot where our car was, where home was 2 hours down a dark highway. My mother walked me a little way down the hall, out of earshot, and then she turned. And the party smile was gone. What was underneath it was not the monster I'd braced for. That would have been easier. What was underneath was a tired, frightened woman of 62 who had built her entire life on a family that looked perfect from the outside and had just watched it crack down the middle in front of everyone who mattered to her. "Do you have any idea," she said, quiet and shaking, "what you just did? In there? On your sister's wedding day?" And I realized she wasn't going to ask me if it was true. She didn't care if it was true. She had already skipped past the invitation, past Ashley, past what had actually been done to me, straight to the only thing that had ever mattered in our family. How it looked, the damage to the picture. My truth wasn't a wound to her. It was a mess. And she was going to ask me to help her clean it up, the way she'd asked me to clean up every mess in that family since I was old enough to hold a rag. Then my mother did the thing I had waited my entire life for her to do. She softened. She reached out and put her hand on my arm, and her eyes filled, and her voice dropped into something warm and pleading and almost tender. "Sweetheart," she said, "listen to me. You're my daughter. You'll always be my daughter. Whatever's happened between you and Ashley, we can fix it. We're family. Families work these things out. And God help me, 30 years of wanting rose up in my throat so fast it choked me, because this was the door. This was the arm around me, the there you are, the being claimed, the exact thing I'd driven 2 hours and worn a hidden ring and swallowed 1,000 cuts hoping for. She was offering it to me at last. but I'd been a nurse too long not to hear the condition in a kind voice. "So here's what we'll do," she went on, smoothing my arm, her voice gaining confidence as she laid it out. "We'll go back in there together, and you'll take the microphone, just for a second, and you'll say it was all a misunderstanding, that the invitation got lost in the mail, that nobody's to blame. We keep Ashley out of it, we let her have her day, and we put this behind us like a family. And then," her hand tightened, warm, certain, "and then everything can go back to normal. You can come to Sunday dinners again. It'll be like none of this happened." There it was, the whole offer, laid on the hallway carpet between us. Come back inside the family. Be held. Be claimed. Be a daughter again. All I had to do was stand up in front of 300 people and lie. Say the truth was a postal accident. Say no one had done anything. Protect the person who'd erased me, and erase myself one more time to keep the picture clean. All I had to do was disappear again, and she'd love me for it. I must have hesitated, because something in my face made my mother's crack. Just for a moment, and what came out of her then was the most honest thing she ever said to me. "You think I don't know?" she said, and her voice broke on it. "You think I don't see how it's been for you? Morgan, I was you. In my family, I was the one who held everything together while my sister got the wedding, and the fuss and the good chances. My mother married me off at 19 to a man with a steady name because it was tidy, because it kept the peace, because somebody had to be the one who didn't make trouble. And I did it. I swallowed it my whole life. Somebody has to hold the family together." She looked at me, wet-eyed, pleading, and she said it, the sentence I'll hear for the rest of my life. "I thought you were strong enough to be that someone." And there it was. Not cruelty. Something worse and more human. She wasn't a villain twirling a mustache. She was a woman who'd been broken by the exact machine she was now asking me to feed, who'd been erased so completely that she'd come to believe erasure was just what love asked of the strong daughter, the good daughter, the one who could take it. She'd been handed the invisible daughter role in her own family 50 years ago, and instead of breaking the machine, she'd learned to run it, because it was the only language of family she had. For 1 second I felt so much tenderness for her I could hardly breathe. I understood her completely. And that's exactly why I couldn't do what she asked, because I finally saw the whole shape of it. A wound passed down like an heirloom, mother to daughter, each one told she was strong enough to disappear. And it stopped being a story about Ashley and a lost invitation. It became a question about whether the machine got me too. So there it was, laid out clean in a country club hallway. On one side, my mother's open arms, 30 years of longing about to be answered. Sunday dinners and being claimed, and the warmth I'd wanted since before I had words for it. Everything I'd ever wanted right there, one lie away. On the other side, nothing I could hold. Just the truth, and a plain gold ring, and a husband in the parking lot, and the cold, unglamorous fact of my own dignity, which had never once bought me a place at that family's table. I want you to understand how close I came. I opened my mouth to say, "Okay." That's how strong the pull was. 30 years of training almost answered for me, but I looked at my mother's face, and I saw my own future in it. A woman at 62 still keeping the picture clean, still telling the strong daughter to disappear, still calling it love, and I knew that if I took the microphone and said it was a postal accident, I wouldn't just be lying to a room. I'd be signing up to be her. I'd be feeding the machine the next 30 years the way she'd fed it 50. And someday, there'd be a girl at a kitchen door table learning to be fine, and I'd be the one telling her she was strong enough to take it. "No," I said. Quiet. No heat. Just the truest word I owned. "No, Mom. I'm not going to lie for you. I'm not going to protect the people who erased me, and I'm not going to disappear so the picture stays pretty. Not anymore." Her face went white. "Morgan, I love you," I said. And I meant it, which was the hardest part. "I think I understand you better than anyone in that room. And I'm still not doing it." She stared at me like she didn't recognize me, and she didn't, because the daughter she knew would have already said yes. I stopped waiting to be chosen, I said. So I'm choosing. I'm going home. That should have been the end of it. I'd said my no, I'd meant it, and the front doors were 20 feet away with the blue evening and the parking lot, and my whole real life waiting behind them. But then my father came out of the ballroom. He must have followed us, must have watched from the ballroom doors. And now he stood at the mouth of the hallway with his club soda still in his hand, this gentle gray man who had never taken a side in his life. And I stopped, because some small, stubborn, 10-year-old part of me was still waiting for him too. Dad, I said, and I let the moment stretch, and I let him see me standing there next to the mother who'd just asked me to erase myself, and I did the thing I'd sworn I wouldn't. I hoped. Come with me, I said. You know what happened. You've known for months. Just walk out with me. You don't have to say anything. Just come. And I watched my father look at me, and then at my mother, and then back at me, and I watched the whole cowardice of his life gather in his face. His mouth opened. His eyes were wet. He wanted to. I could see that he wanted to, and somehow that made it worse. Morgan, he said, barely a whisper. Your mother. The family. I can't just... And he didn't finish, because there was no end to that sentence that wasn't the truth, which was that he was going to stay. He was going to walk back into that ballroom and stand beside the machine one more time, because 64 years of not making trouble doesn't undo itself in a hallway. My father chose to stay. That was the price. I'd said my no and kept my dignity and my marriage and my truth, and in the same breath I lost him. Watched him choose the picture over his own daughter, right in front of me. Getting free cost me my father. I paid it standing up. I kept my eyes dry in the hallway. Whatever was coming could wait for the highway. I just nodded at my father, once. The way you nod at someone across a distance you both understand can't be crossed tonight, and I turned and walked towards the glass doors. Daniel was already there. He'd come out of the ballroom when he saw me go, and he was standing by the coat check with my wrap over his arm and his eyes only on me, and when I reached him, he didn't ask a single question. He just put the wrap around my shoulders and took my hand, my left hand, the one with the ring, and pushed the door open into the cool evening. Behind us, the ballroom was still murmuring. My mother was somewhere in it doing damage control. My sister was somewhere in it, learning what it feels like when the story turns on you. Let them have the room. I'd wanted a place at that table my whole life, and I finally understood I'd been trying to be seated at a table that was built with my chair already missing. We walked out under the country club portico, past the valet, into the parking lot, where the air smelled like cut grass and summer. My heels clicked on the pavement. My ring caught the last of the light. And I felt something I had genuinely never felt in the presence of my family, not once in 34 years. I felt tall, not triumphant, not vindicated, just tall and quiet, and finally the actual size of myself, walking to my own car with my own husband toward my own life, having said the true thing and refused to take it back. Daniel opened my door. Home? He said. Home, I said. And for the first time, the word didn't mean the house I grew up in. It meant wherever he and I were driving. It's been almost a year now, and I'll tell you what freedom actually looks like, because it's quieter than the movies promise. My mother never called to apologize. I didn't expect her to. In her version of that night, I'm still the one who ruined a wedding, and Ashley is still more sinned against than sinning, and the family closed around them the way a body closes around a splinter, pushing me the rest of the way out. That machine didn't break just because I stopped feeding it. It's still running. They still have their Sunday dinners. I'm just not at them. And the strange thing is how much lighter I am for it. Ashley and I don't speak. Some cousins took her side, a few quietly took mine, and Emma calls me every couple of weeks just to talk, which is more than my sister ever did. The community kept mostly believing the version that was easiest, because that's what communities do. I made my peace with not being believed. It turns out you can survive people thinking the wrong thing about you, as long as you're not one of them. And my father. About 4 months after the wedding, my phone rang, and it was him. He didn't say much. He's not a man who says much. But he said, "I was wrong, Morgan. I should have walked out with you." That was all. No grand apology, no showing up at my door, no leaving my mother. Just 3 sentences from a gentle, cowardly man who'd finally let himself know one true thing. And I didn't slam the door, but I didn't fling it open either. I said, "Thank you for saying that, Dad." And I left it there, on my terms. A door held open exactly as wide as I chose, and not 1 inch more. He calls sometimes now. We talk about the garage, the weather, nothing. It's small. It's honest. It's the most real thing my family has ever offered me. I spent 30 years auditioning for a part in my own family, doing everything right, holding everything together, waiting for the day they'd finally choose me. And the day I stopped waiting to be chosen was the day I finally got to go home, to a home I built myself, with a man who never once made me hide my own ring. That's my story. A hidden ring, a thrown-away invitation, a hallway where I finally said no. If your family ever taught you that being the strong one meant disappearing, hear me. You're allowed to stop waiting for a door that won't open and build your own. If this reached something in you, share it with the person you're thinking of right now. Drop a comment, hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.